Some people idealise the past, but far more common is the tendency to patronise it. We can't help ourselves. We make it one thing or another, and then we set about considering ourselves superior to it. At first, I must admit, it seemed as though I might have set out on a wild goose chase. Many, if not most, of the heftiest histories of the 50s were written by men, and while they have, for instance, an awful lot to say about Anthony Eden and the Suez Crisis, they are rather less forthcoming about the lives of women, especially the kind who might have longed for Urquhart furniture. The male historian's favourite resource, when it comes to the female 50s, is mass observation. The research organisation, founded in 1937, to record everyday life via legions of diary-writing volunteers. And while the journals people wrote, under MO's auspices, are vivid and fascinating, and often extremely moving, their female authors were mostly housewives and secretaries, women rather like my grandmothers, in fact. Still, I read on, and eventually was rewarded with a few names. Several weeks into the new Queen's reign in 1952, I learned, the Picture Post ran a feature entitled The New Elizabethans. On the magazine's list were 42 men, among them Nye Bevan, Benjamin Britten, Graham Greene and Henry Moore, and 5 women. 2 of these women were actresses, Glynis Johns, star of the 1948 mermaid hit Miranda, and Celia Johnson, whose performance in Brief Encounter had proved so resonant for a generation of women dealing with the return of the men from the war. A third was the ballet dancer Margot Fonteyn. Actresses and dancers probably weren't, I felt, illustrative of anything very much. They are surely anomalies, whatever the age. But the last 2 names caught my eye. Barbara Ward, an economist, and Rose Heilbron, then Britain's only female QC. They sounded interesting. Then, 600 pages into David Kynaston's amazing panorama, Family Britain, there came a couple more. Contrary to subsequent mythology, writes Kynaston, the 1950s were not entirely bereft of ambitious, independent-minded women. His examples were Sheila van Damm, the rally car driver and theatre manager, and Margery Fish, the gardener and writer. I took these names, new to me, as a gauntlet thrown down. I would investigate and celebrate their achievements, and I would find others like them. I understood that I wouldn't be rewriting the decade. The facts would see to that. It was a time when most women were married, 75% of adult women in 1951. When relatively few women worked, though not perhaps as few as you might think. In 1956, women comprised about 30% of the workforce, and when, whether thanks to expectation or necessity, a huge amount of energy was devoted to housework, full-time housewives spent between 61 and 70 hours a week on washing, ironing, and the rest. Women could not take out mortgages in their own name, even if they had a job, and if they wanted to be fitted with a diaphragm, one of the few forms of contraception then available, they had first to produce a marriage certificate. Abortion was illegal, but we need to be clear. The end of the war did not send every female hurrying back into the kitchen, just as the feminism of the 60s did not spring from the minds of women who had spent the last decade in an apron and rubber gloves. As Catherine Whitehorn, who graduated from Cambridge in 1950, puts in her memoir Selective Memory, there's been a tendency to look on the 50s as simply a damp patch between the battleground of the 40s and the fairground of the 60s. Yet it was anything but. We had the heady sense that everything was getting better. It goes without saying that austerity Britain could be grim. All that smog and rubble, the feeling that rationing would last forever. Yet perhaps we underestimate the sense of excitement many people, especially the young, felt about what lay ahead. Margaret Steggles, the heroine of Stella Gibbons' 1946 novel Westward, can't help but think of the ruins of